Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the second ICANN APAC TWNIC Engagement Forum. We will now proceed to the high-level opening plenary. In this session, we're going to discuss the state of cybersecurity, as well as its challenges, best practices, and shared responsibility. Please welcome the moderator for the session, Dr. Kenny Huang, member of the board and CEO of TWNIC. Dr. Huang, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Kenny Huang. Welcome to the section. I think the configuration is a little bit strange because I'm a single man sitting on the stage. But anyway, because we have all distinguished speakers from different places, and they are already connected through online. So welcome again to join the section. This section, we're going to address some sort of security challenge. For example, we're talking about cybersecurity challenge, and we try to address the potential best practice, like a cybernorm, and what's the best approach to mitigate the cybersecurity, and also try to discuss some potential shared responsibility or shared liability. For example, like DNSSEC or Rpki, how does that impact the cybersecurity in the internet? So before I begin, I'd like to introduce all panelists. And starting from Adele Abrogan is Technical Engagement Vice President of ICANN, Adele. So the second panelist is Edmund Zhang, CEO of Asia. Okay. The third is George Michelson, Senior Research and Development Scientist in APNIC. Thank you, George. And next one will be Milton Muller, a professor of School of Public Policy at Georgia's Institute of Technologies. Thank you, Muller. And the last one will be Katrina Santika, CEO of .lv registry. Thank you, Katrina. Okay, before I begin, I just quickly summarize how we try to address. When we try to address the cybersecurity, this session main focus on address the cybersecurity from the very high level, and we try to address the cybersecurity, especially regarding to the potential challenge on cybersecurity, and including the technology, regulation, cross-border jurisdiction, things like that. I would like to invite the panelists that go the first round, and please share your view with us regarding to cybersecurity challenge, not only to the internet jurisdiction, and also you probably can mention a little bit on the what would be the best practice to mitigate the cybersecurity. So I follow the order starting from Adele. Would you like to share some view from you? Okay, starting from Adele.
Yes, thank you, Kenny, and I'm happy to be on this panel. We don't say it anymore very often, but definitely it would have been better if we met face-to-face and have this discussion face-to-face. But the new normal, make us do this online. But it tied me very well into the topic I'm going to talk about today, which is particularly the DNS. The pandemic has allowed us to definitely see how the internet is critical component of our day-to-day life today. And when we know the role of the DNS, it's very obvious that we see how critical its secure operation and stable operation is for the overall internet. So I will address few aspects of the DNS security today, and from ICANN perspective. The DNS has been designed some 30 years ago with primarily simplicity in mind. Straightforward, doing something, mapping name to number, primarily allowing people to easily access services and application online using name. So that was it, and it was designed with some global trust in mind, because people know who run what and know who run which DNS. So security aspects were not built in by default. And one big element of that is the way data are shared or transmitted between the different components of the DNS, which was open. Over those 30 years, of course, this has evolved in many ways, and at the different element or components of the DNS, the protocol has evolved, the namespace has evolved, the service providing of the DNS has evolved, and the provisioning system has also changed over the time. From our perspective, securing the DNS is not a one task, it's not just one piece of it. Like for instance, the DNS as we usually talk about, but we see it as a more holistic approach, touching on all those 4 different key components of the DNS ecosystem, strengthening or hardening the protocol, adding more security to it, protecting the namespace to make sure that it is served properly, providing a service that user can trust, and also ensuring that people have a way to access the provisioning system in a secure way that does not impact the other 3. So it is an holistic approach from our view. But we usually talk, as I mentioned, about the DNSSEC, which is a way to add authentication to the interaction between resolver and authoritatives. That means when you request that mapping, the authoritative server, which are the servers set up to provide the information through some cryptographically signed mechanism, they will ascertain that the information that they're providing to the resolver is genuine, because coming from them as authoritative, but they also ascertain that they have the authority to provide that information, and that can be checked back by the resolver through a chain of trust that goes up to the root. So it's that simplicity. It doesn't encrypt the information itself. It just adds a signature so that somebody that received the information, the resolver, can verify and ascertain that what it received is accurate and should be delivered by that specific server. So that aspect of adding the authentication to the DNS has changed a little bit the protocol side, and is something that we have been raising awareness on over the past few years, and that prevents somebody in the middle of the communication to either tamper with the information, redirect the traffic to somewhere else, and prevent the end user to access the real or the genuine information he's looking for online. So that is something clear that clearly addresses a specific issue that the DNS has, but it doesn't address it all. DNS also has 2 aspects: the signing, which I just explained now, which give add the authenticity, but we also have the validation. It's like a form in the regular life. You fill a form, you add a lot of information, but at the end of the form, you sign it, right? To make sure that the information that you are providing is correct. But at the end of the rope, somebody has to check the signature and make sure that this signature is valid, right? You cannot just take the information and go with it. If you don't check the signature, asking the person to sign doesn't make sense. So there is also the validation part. The resolver, when it's received the information, it has to check and to validate that what he received, which is signed, is accurate. It's accurately signed, and signature is coming from the right person, etc., etc. we usually don't put a lot of emphasis on that aspect of the DNSSEC. In our outreach, usually we encourage, authoritative server operator, which are usually a registry, and registrar sometimes who provide second-level authoritative server to sign their zone to make sure that the information they are provided is accurate and cryptographically verifiable. But we don't put enough emphasis on the validation side. And this is something that we are trying to push more and more from ICANN side, because we consider that as a low-hanging fruit. It's something that all ISP, any IT infrastructure manager that run DNS as a resolver for their user can very easily and quickly turn on. Because if we don't have the validation side, we can sign all the zones we want. If nobody is checking, it doesn't make sense. So the validation part is also an important aspect of the DNSSEC that we are more and more putting our emphasis on and encouraging ISP or anyone running DNS to validate to make sure it is on. Luckily, more and more software vendors are today, making validation as a default feature in their software, which allow IT operator not to do too much. So it is an important thing. So to maybe conclude this first intervention, I will say that the DNS is a critical part of any IT infrastructure. It is not something just turn on and you forget in a corner. Its environment and the infrastructure has to be tightened and continue being monitored. Signing your zone is important for the DNSSEC, and we have a lot of outreach capacity building program that help operators to do that. But validation is also key to add the trust to the customer you are serving as resolver operators in general. So I will stop there. And we'll be happy to interact with you and answer questions related to what we are doing as ICANN to promote these security measures, looking at this from a very holistic manner. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Adele. Thank you for your technical introduction, even address DNS and resolver issue. Actually, European Union just just proposed European Union resolver policies. We probably can address the same topic later on. Not right now. I move to the next panelist, Eamon Zhang, CEO of DAISA. Eamon, I remember you prepared a slide. Please go on.
Thank you, Kenny, and thank you for having me here. I would have really liked to be in Taiwan with you. In fact, I took the 2 vaccine shots and was waiting for if I might be able to get on a plane in last minute, but that didn't work. But great to be here with you. Building on what Adiel said, I will focus a little bit on my introduction talk on DNS abuse. I think Adiel mentioned more on the DNS system itself, but there are abuses that utilize the DNS as well. And this is something that has been a hot topic at ICANN, and also a bit of work from the registries and registrars to try to build a norm. Myself from .Asia is of course part of it. But this is the discussion about DNS abuse is not new. It's certainly been around for a while, and I don't know whether my what I'm sharing is being seen at the session, but I did share my screen. So this is a discussion that has started actually all the way, and it has intermittently has been discussed at ICANN, but especially in the new GTLDs since 2012, and then in 2017.
Sorry, Eamon, can you share your screen, share your slide, because we didn't see your slide on the screen.
Yeah, I did try to share. I'll stop and share
okay,
again.
right. It's coming. Hold on.
Is it coming through? All right.
Okay, right.
But we are seeing the wrong screen probably because we are seeing an ICANN website.
No, that is the
You are
part
sharing
that
the-
I'm sharing. I am sharing the ICANN website
okay.
because that's where the journey, I think, of DNS abuse began. This is back in 2017, and ICANN actually put out a fairly reasonable framework for looking at how to deal with abuse in registered names, unregistered names, and the reporting of such abuses to registries and how registry should respond. Since 2017, though, especially into 2019, especially between 2019 and 2020, the registries and registrars really came together to try to put forward I guess, a norm in many ways to address DNS abuse issues. And this is part of the document. And most importantly, to identify what we really mean by DNS abuse. And there were 5 items really: malware, botnets, phishing, farming, and also spam that is used to propagate the above 4. So this is something that the registries and registrars really came together and tried to develop. The genesis of that and the reason for developing that is the understanding that the DNS abuse issue is actually beyond what ICANN directly can do, and this is something that I believe in as well. But I will touch on something that I really feel for as well. So building on that common statement, I think a DNS Abuse Institute was put together, supported by PIR from .org and .asia, and others are supportive of this as well. I think this tries to set a industry or industry norm going forward on thinking about DNS abuse, which is great, and it's also a very similar activity is being brought to the Internet and Jurisdiction Initiative as well, and a DNS level action to DNS abuse was put together. As you can see, this would be a more robust framework. It has more details, more information in it, and action and responses and those kind of things. But I'll scroll down to the kind of the important meat here, which again re-identifies a few items that is determined to be identified as abuses, technical abuses, which is malware, phishing, farming, botnets. And here you see a little bit different. So you can see fast flux included here, which is using the DNS to, switching over to different IP addresses and networks by hopping through different networks using the same domain name. And of course, spam, again, also supporting the other parts of the abuse. But so this is all great, and the addition here also is that there are content abuses, and this is where things might be a little bit outside of ICANN's purview. It includes child abuse material, like what is called CSAM, child sexual abuse material. Controlled substances, violent, extreme content, hate speech, and most interestingly, intellectual property as well. So all this, I think, is great initiative, but building on what Pablo this morning said, this seems to be a direction that is driving the multi-stakeholder model down and potentially the democratization down as well. The way I see it is a little bit different, and this is and we are going to have a session tomorrow at 2 p.m. to dive more deeply into it as well. But I think it's important for the community to also look at the DNS abuse as an ecosystem, a little bit of what Adiel mentioned as well. And this is just for GTLDs. But you can, just quickly on this, the basic of it is, of course, the registry and the registrar system. And the registry produces the DNS for the TLD, and it also has WHOIS or RDAP, or the registration data part. But there's more to it. There's the IANA root database, which supports the root DNS, and also many other components like DNS servers are hosted other places, the DNS resolvers, the ISPs, and many other other applications and web and email hosting that depends on it. And here's how I see it. There are things that are within ICANN's purview, which is on the left side, and there are things that are beyond ICANN's purview. There is the DNS, there's the infrastructure, and there is also the content, and there's different types of content. And what is interesting to note is that this is sort of my little bit of a conclusion, is that abuse happens at different aspects and different parts of the infrastructure. However, there is a part that ICANN does, and can play a role. And this is a little bit of a minority view from my colleagues from registries and registrars, is that I do think that there is a role that ICANN can play. And that speaks to what Pablo said in terms of upholding the multi-stakeholder approach, rather than what Pablo quoted Chancellor Merkel in saying that we'll be forced to adopt industry standards alone. So in closing, with my first intervention, I think DNS abuse, of course, is a very complicated issue. It's not something that ICANN itself can deal with, but I think ICANN has a role. Of course, it's only on GTLDs, but if you look at the successful case of the UDRP, the Uniform Dispute Resolution Policy, when it is successfully deployed in the GTLD, many CCTLDs actually put in place variants of this. And this is I think, the DNS abuse situation, which continues to be a hot topic for multi-years now, I think represents an opportunity for ICANN and ICANN's community to really build and extend our work in the multi-stakeholder model and make it work for things that ICANN can start, but actually can influence other parts of the community. And with that, I will close and hand it back to Kenny.
Thank you, Eamon. Actually, that's a very interesting topic. You gradually change the internet governance entity, become like a law enforcement agencies. But anyway, that's a very interesting topic. Against also a lot of concept actually was contradictory to each other. For example, like against the Communication Decency Act Section 230, intermediary is not liable for the third-party content, and also against the Manila Principle #1, intermediary should be shared from liability for third-party content. But anyway, we can come back to the topic later. I'd like to invite the next panelist, George Michelson, senior research scientist in APNIC. George, your turn.
Thank you. I have some slides to share. Can you confirm if these have come through okay, please?
Yes. Okay.
So, hello everyone. My name is George Michelson. I'm from APNIC. I'm actually currently a product manager, and I have oversight of the APNIC resource public key infrastructure function. I also worked on specification in IETF. And I want to talk today briefly to highlight what I think are the governance qualities that we're trying to understand in this space. Originally, Joyce Chen from APNIC was going to present, but she's unable to be here today, and please let me pass on her apologies. So, what is RPKI? Well, let's go straight in. It's the Internet Number Resource PKI. There you go, pack done. I could stop now. Well, no. What is a PKI? So PKI stands for Public Key Infrastructure. The complicated part in this is the public-private key part. That's what public means here. It's about cryptography. It's not about crypto coins, it's about the mathematics of cryptography. But the important part for a governance conversation, which is what I think we're having here, is the infrastructure word. This is not random signing. This is not like PGP between two people with no intermediary structure. There is infrastructure. There's a delegation model where people say what they know, and there's maintenance of that publicly visible structure. So this, very quickly, is about a hierarchy. And there are critical concepts in a PKI which relate to the issuer and the subject and the chains of issuer and subject that are innately hierarchical. So something to note here is that we're actually using this all the time, every day. Here's an example of a PKI you know. It's the web PKI. It's the technology behind HTTPS. So if you notice the little lock icon in this browser window over ICANN, the one that says safe browsing, well, if you click on it, it's showing you that you have a certificate, a web PKI certificate behind your website. And if you click on the icon, you get shown information like this. Now, a lot of this information is technical. It's not strictly speaking. It's about who issued the certificate. That's the public part of the PKI model, and who they issued it to, the subject, and how long it's valid. And one of the problems with this system, the web PKI, is the governance process. How do you know which certificates to accept or reject? That process of decision, it's really quite opaque. It doesn't have a public governance structure that you can easily deal with. We're actually talking about something in PKIs which is called the trust anchor, or TA role. It's the critical governance question aside from the operational requirements of how things work. Now, there is a governance structure behind the TAs, the trust anchors, in your browser, deciding what's acceptable behavior, rejecting non-compliant agencies. But I think a problem for us collectively is it's not a very transparent model. So here's another PKI that we're using. This is the one that's already been touched on. It's DNSSEC, and it's not certificates. It's not the same as the web PKI. This is more infrastructure inside the machine. This PKI has stellar governance. It has done really well. There's processes in ICANN, between ICANN and the CCTLDs. There's a governance process around technology with IETF. The TA function, in particular, has some of the best public exposure I have ever seen. There is a huge amount of public engagement in the maintenance of trust, in the fundamentals behind this hierarchy of signing. And even when things go wrong, that happened with battery fail in a safe protecting some of the signing materials for a public ceremony, this wasn't hidden. This was openly discussed. So I think that this is a governance standard that if we were talking about public interest governance of security and improvements in the community, this is a model we have to aspire to. Okay, so if you look at what's going on underneath in DNSSEC, it is really about cryptography. There's no certificate. By the way, I'm using here a tool called DNSViz to help understand. This was developed by a colleague of mine, Casey Decchio, who used to work at VeriSign. Very, very nice tool. So, two forms of PKI with public governance, we're using them all the time. Now, let's widen the net a bit. Do you know about the metaphor of the internet as a stool with three legs? It's a nice metaphor. Here's the internet stool. It's very simple, it's very robust, and it comes in many colors. So the three legs of the internet stool, one leg, that's ways to find addresses from names. That's the DNS, the governance in the hands of ICANN and the CCTLD. Another leg, that's addresses, handing out addresses responsibly. That's the RIR process. And the last leg is BGP. How do you find names to addresses and the relationship between them? How do you get from an address to the server that's giving you? And that's not really subject to a governance question right now because that's running in an industry-neutral space. Voila, we have a working internet. Everything else is extra. You can have cushions if you like. So what really happened is that we grew another leg, and the stool had to grow another leg. It's now a four-legged stool, and it comes in many colors. So we still have DNS, addresses, and BGP, but we now have the web. The web's everything. The web is everywhere. And people now actually assume that the other three legs are just fine. And they think of the internet as the web, right? So we're all comfortable with the infrastructure and we let it ride and we focus on the web. So if you think about the world this way, the DNSSEC and the web, the things we showed before, they have good PKI. Those PKI services are about integrity of names. And so we added stability, extra functions, into the security of two of the legs of this stool model some time ago. With RPKI, we've added strength to two more of the legs. We've strengthened routing and we've strengthened addressing. And interestingly, the PKI here, it covers two things, not one each. The two things are both covered by the same PKI. And you know, it makes a lot of sense because the function of BGP is to forward addresses. They're talking about the same thing. Building a security system for addresses and BGP to be one thing, that was quite a good move. But it introduces some interesting complexity in the difference between address governance and routing governance. So in public interest terms, in governance terms, we've developed a really nice rugged structure. It's stable and we understand how it works. And we've secured four central pillars of the ecology that we're depending on. Well, if we look at these side by side, the old familiar PKI, the newer PKI for addresses and routing, it's quite clear that we understand these things are secure. So it's a bit less secure perhaps than we'd like, but it's nonetheless happening. DNSSEC is fully deployed and available in virtually every domain. The web, well, it's so common, it's become the default. Browsers are now actually discussing in their software design not allowing you to proceed to insecure websites sometimes. The routing and addressing security, that's a little less mature. It came along later, and it's still in design in some technical parts. Governance in RPKI is in the RIR system. It's subject to a public policy consensus process, and the NRO processes, which go to some operational behaviors, and the IETF standards processes. Deployment in operations is still very much a work in progress, but we can look at it and we can see how far we're going. So, the reason that this PKI is bound into RIR is because it's so strongly aligned to the hierarchy of how addresses delegate. RPKI aligns completely with the delegation model. And so where we have national internet registries, NIRs, like TWNIC, then the RPKI model delegates down through the NIR and follows the hierarchy. So in this table, I'm showing you the levels of penetration of RPKI at the RIR level. And you can see that it's variable. RIPE have done a supreme job, lots and lots of work promoting uptake. APNIC still has a way to go. AFRINIC and LACNIC are doing well. And you can see all the detail at the RIR and economy level in statistics that are available from the NRO, but also APNIC has some research information available from the lab site under BGP. Now, this is an example of the benefits of having strong local community convergence. This is the outcome of TWNIC addressing RPK uptake within the community in Taiwan. And this is an awesome outcome. They deserve a virtual round of applause because this is one of the best RPKI deliverables at this level that I have seen. So I do need to point out that some technical aspects of securing BGP, it has two qualities: origin, where things come from, and path, how you get there. And so far, RPKI is only securing origin. Securing path is a complexity that is still in early design. And so what this means is that we can't actually end hijacks and misrouting outcomes at this time. RPKI provides proof. It provides strong, provable attestations of what we wanted to happen. And that's a good beginning. It brings trust into the room. So we do have other NIRs. There's a delegation story here about how things are working. 4 NIRs at this time operating under APNIC actually have delegation. 2 more operate inside us, and the 3rd, VMNIC, are on the brink of delegation. From a governance perspective, APNIC is the nexus for discussion in our region, and we use the routing security SIG to guide how we operate, and that's where we discuss visible states of our service and where you would get more detailed reports on our KPIs and our duty cycle. So in summary, the reason I think the conversation is important is because we're talking about fundamentals. We had protections for 2 critical legs. We've grown protections for the other 2, and that's better. We have to understand its alignment to governance process. In our space, RPKI follows the RIR process and operations. And we have to understand this intersection between address distribution governance and between operational governance. Well, that's enough from me, so I'm going to stop here to leave time for everyone else. Thank you for listening, and thank you for letting me present today.
Okay, thank you, George. That's a very interesting topic. And also, George tried to expand the current regional internet registry from existing 3 leg to 4 leg. I believe probably we have 10 leg after the section. So the next panelist, I'd like to move to Milton Muller, a professor from Georgia Institute of Technology. Milton, that's your turn.
Thank you, Kenny. That was a very good joke, but I am not an insect. I only have 2 legs, and maybe I evolved beyond the 4 legs at some point in a distant past. I do not have slides. I'm going to kind of riff on what other people have said. When I first heard about this panel, I was planning to talk about supply chain security as an issue. That's a big deal here in the United States. It is, a sign of the sort of withdrawal from globalization that some of you were talking about. I think Pablo was mentioning this. So during the 90s and the 2000s, we created this globally distributed internet and a globally distributed telecommunications infrastructure and electronics industry, and we had free trade agreements that allowed products as well as information services components to be distributed all over the world. And in the course of doing this, software is very modular. You can program a piece of it in India, and then parts of it maybe the firmware is done in Korea, and the United States is doing some of the design, and you're having multinational corporations that are setting it all up. And within the space of 4 or 5 years, we have just seen this globally distributed system start to fall apart, mainly because of nation-state tensions. And there's not a lot that can be done about that without new institutions. What we know will not solve this problem is more tech nationalism. Tech nationalism is the enemy of global trust. It's the enemy of developing transnational standards and practices and procedures that will allow supply chain security in software and equipment to be developed. This is a very complicated issue. You probably heard of the SolarWinds hack, in which some network management software was somehow the software build process was broken into by a nation-state actor, and they actually put some backdoors and some malware into the software and had it distributed to tens of thousands of companies that were using the software all over the world, but mostly focused on the United States. And so when they uploaded their update, and because they had broken into the internal build process of SolarWinds, the update was authenticated, right? They even had the SAML thing, security markup language authentication had been controlled in a way that, or spoofed in a way that allowed this to happen. So this was a very disturbing event, and many people are talking about how to respond to it. And unfortunately, again, instead of talking about globalized institutional solutions such as the RIRs or ICANN, we are talking more and more about reinforcing nationalistic forms of institutional protection. So that's a sad story, and I will leave you with that thought because there's no simple or quick solution to it. It's a little bit more focused to talk about the RIR ICANN environment, which is what Michelson and Adiel and Edmund were talking about. And that tells you something, okay? Right there, that tells you that when we were in the early stages of setting up internet governance, we created non-national globalized institutions that built upon the IETF, which was the standardization process and was connected to that. And these private sector-based institutions have been relatively free, not completely, of course, but relatively free of the nationalistic competition and the militaristic and securitization that is hampering trust in other areas. But Mr. Michelson in particular made some very interesting points. So he said the DNSSEC has good governance, and in effect he said it has good governance because there is a strict hierarchy for the domain name system. We have a single root. If ICANN adopts DNSSEC at the root, we can flow that security down through the top-level domain registries, and we can then distribute it to the registrars, although my impression was that the registrars were not adopting it that much. Maybe things have improved recently. I haven't been following it that closely. And of course, that is true. Having a single central trust anchor makes governance easier, but it also concentrates power. And that's been the problem with the DNS from the beginning. You know, that's why we had the controversies about the US government controlling the root, and we did solve that problem. But what we have to do is we have to embarrass Adiel and maybe Paul Wilson would be a good person to embarrass about this and ask him, why don't we have a single central trust anchor for the addressing system? Why doesn't ICANN control the root of the addressing system? And the answer is, well, I actually thought it was a good thing that the RIRs didn't want to do that. They wanted to have their own trust anchors for their own regions. And that gave us a little bit more decentralization of authority, but it also gave us a little more complexity. So I think that's a very interesting issue to discuss. And I think in comparison that Mr. Michelson made among the trust architectures of DNS, websites, IP addressing, and routing was extremely important and interesting. I will say that people in cybersecurity studies that I deal with are not so impressed with the certificate authority structure of websites. And we know we had some major problems with that about 10 years ago. Things have improved, mainly because of Google and the, what's it called? The CA browser forum, sort of tightening up standards. And that's another example of a new global private sector-based institution that is addressing the problem, but they do not have a strict hierarchy, and it is still, I think it's generally a pretty good system, but it's a lot more flexible and a lot less easily secured than a strict hierarchy. So that's another interesting issue to discuss. Finally, I want to talk about DNS abuse. Edmund, I love you. I love .asia. I love your attacks on DNS abuse. But look, content is content, right? Content can be illegal. Content can be abusive, like child pornography is content, and it's abusive, and it's illegal. So we should do something about it. But I don't understand why people want to call this problem of illegal and abusive content as DNS abuse. You know, it's not DNS abuse, it's content. It's a question of how much do you regulate content. It's copyright infringement. It's, you know, sometimes it's just outright censorship. You know, the Chinese government or the Vietnamese government might call, or the Thai government, you know, would call insulting the king abuse. Right? So whether, of course, a domain name is going to be involved somewhere, but you're not abusing the DNS. You're doing illegal content, or you're doing abusive content. And I just don't understand why people mix these things up or somehow connect them. And the only reason to do that, and this is what scares the civil society advocates in the ICANN environment, the only reason to do that is that you're going to try to make the domain name registries and registrars into intermediaries who are responsible for the content on their system. And I think most of us don't want that to happen. And I think Kenny made a very good point about that, saying, you know, we don't expect the platforms to be legally responsible for bad content or illegal content on their platforms. We do expect them to take private initiative or editorial discretion to clean up their systems as much as they want, but we don't make them legally liable. And insofar as what Edmund is proposing is that kind of a Section 230 kind of, we're voluntarily taking a commitment to rid our systems of illegal content. You know, I may or may not agree with that in any particular instance, but it's perfectly legitimate. Just please don't call it DNS abuse. It's not DNS abuse. It's about illegal or abusive content. So one other comment about securing the path. That was a good point, that we have secured the address delegation process or authenticated it, but the path is not secured. And BGP-SEC tried to do that, and we've studied that a bit, and it's really just a top-heavy, ineffective standard. We will not get to securing the path through the BGP-SEC standard because one of the basic problems with it is economic. Basically, you don't get any improvement in security until everybody adopts it. And anybody who studies technology diffusion will tell you that when that's the case, you know, there's no incentive to get universal diffusion. RPKI, you get incremental security. If I adopt RPKI and you adopt RPKI, I get more security and you get more security. It doesn't matter if the rest of the world adopts it. With BGP-SEC and path security, that's not true. If somebody else doesn't adopt it, you just don't get more security. And it's also very expensive and very clunky. So maybe there's some new developments there that I don't know about, but I think we're a long ways away from securing a path. I think I've gone on for enough. Let's move on to the next one. Thanks.
Thank you, Professor Muller. So remember, we don't call DNS abuse. We just we abuse DNS itself. Okay, let's move to the next panelist. Katrina, your turn.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Good morning, at least for those of you who are there. Okay, let me start by sharing my slides. Well, I'll take it from a different perspective, and I will, just like previous speakers, I'm very sorry not to be there with you, so I will use technology to make it as well, as good as possible to make sure that we get this feeling of being in the same room. Well, I think by the end of this pandemic, we will get used to all those nice tools that we use. And thankfully, internet is still working. It still works. We haven't broken it. And that's thanks to all the people who built it and who still develop and maintain the necessary infrastructure. And clearly, country code top-level domains, or CCTLDs,
Sorry,
are
Katrina,
among those.
are you showing your slide?
Yes.
We didn't see the slide for the moment.
Don't you see it? Oh.
Okay. We
you
have
should see
cybersecurity
it,
issues.
I'm seeing them fine.
Okay, so that's
Yeah,
those
I can see it. I can see it.
Yeah, okay, I see that you should be seeing it then too. In the, okay, so is that okay now?
Okay, now?
Yeah, okay, good. So I was trying to say that country code top-level domains, or CCTLDs, are among those who had been there from the beginning. And well, at least almost the beginning. And the oldest, maybe I should say, the most experienced CCTLDs are 30 or 35 years old. .tw, for example, has been established in 1989, correct? So in people's years, it might not seem much, but in internet years, one could say that CCTLDs are the dinosaurs of the cyberspace. So we've seen the dawn of the internet. But at the same time, let's be fair. At the very beginning, there was not much to see. The landscape was pretty deserted. Over the years, situation has changed dramatically. So today, well, in the beginning, even the notion of domain names was different. It was they were seen as technical identifiers. Today they are much more than that. They have commercial, social, in some cases even political or critical value. So no wonder that domain names are used, more and more will be used for malicious purposes. And therefore, no wonder that governments, businesses, and ordinary internet users, they want to protect their domain names and they want to protect themselves. Today, the number of organizations and governments and many different actors who want to actively participate in decision-making process is also rapidly growing. In preparation for this discussion, I found a website from ENISA. ENISA, that's the European Union Agency for Cybersecurity. And they have tried to summarize all the actors in the field. So here you can see each bubble on this slide represents one institution. And that's, here we talk only about the European Union. So if we look globally, the number of those governmental institutions and actors from other areas also grows exponentially, perhaps. Look at the multi-stakeholder community at ICANN. Again, we have registries, registrars, businesses, governments, users. They all coming together to discuss different topical issues. DNS abuse and cybersecurity are among those issues. Well, we all know that ICANN cannot tell CCTLDs what to do and what not to do. GTLDs, registries and registrars of generic top-level domains, they are in the spotlight. They are told to deal with this issue or to implement that measure. But does it mean that CCTLDs are immune and will never be told, not by ICANN, but by all those other actors to act and do the same, especially if at some point in the future GTLDs would offer better levels of protection. So the pressure is growing. Currently, statistically, CCTLD space is safer than GTLD space. There have been researchers showing that in some new GTLDs, number of malicious domains is more than 50% of all registrations. So, but no, let's not talk about those numbers. I found some other numbers, and for example, one of those is that a new phishing site launches every 20 seconds. I'm talking for, I don't know, 3 or 4 minutes now, which means 12 to 15 phishing sites just popped up somewhere in the internet. So again, clearly, it's not a surprise that people want to do something to address it. Another statistic that surprised me very much recently was the data from anti-phishing working group that's saying that, you can see 80% of attacks were hosted in HTTPS. Why I thought it was interesting, because I've just heard that there are some initiatives, ideas how to make internet safer, and one of those ideas would be to mandate the use of HTTPS and DNSSEC in hope that it would make internet safer. And, as you know, that if all that you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So I also tried to find how many of those bad actors have enabled DNSSEC. Well, I didn't manage to find that statistics, but well, I know that many CCTLDs around the world do offer, they have signed their CCTLDs, and they offer this service. And well, I didn't find the statistics. I know that unfortunately the number of signed domains is still not very high. At the same time, I did find an article by SIDN Labs in which they do believe that well, it wouldn't be an issue for bad actors to sign their domains. So what I thought that maybe at some point TLS, DNSSEC, and other security measures will become the clearest indicators of malicious sites. Because well, definitely bad actors would try to do everything to look as legitimate as possible. But still, so what can we do? What would be the right approach here? Among CCTLDs, there is no universal approach to handle that. Each CCTLD chooses their own path. Some stay away from any other function except the technical ones. They believe that, no, we do our technical thing. Some others do believe that if they do nothing, they will be extinct in the nearest future. So they try to be more proactive. They have proactive stance, and they develop policies and actively fight abuse in their zones. I already mentioned this, and in this aside, so this another aspect that they're showing. This is here. Here they have some functions, where they call them priorities. So for institutions that are involved in cybersecurity. And I was glad to see that there are many things that, among those bubbles, that CCTLDs are already doing, like training, R&D, capacity building, awareness raising, and many other things. But one particular one, I believe, is really important, especially when we talk about CCTLDs, and that's information sharing and cooperation. For CCTLDs, those are regional organizations like APTLD in Asia Pacific, CCNSO, which is a global platform body within ICANN structure created by and for a country code top-level domain registries. And conferences like this one, they serve as platforms that allow CCTLDs, and not only CCTLDs, to learn from each other, share best practice, and discuss the best approaches of how to move forward. Now, personally, I have greatly benefited from sharing, from learning from others, and therefore I firmly believe that importance of such platforms will only grow. So with that, I will finish my very brief intro. So thank you very much. Kenny, back to you.
Okay, right. Thank you, Katrina. I saw you speak longer, so we have 30 minutes earlier. Okay, before I hand over to the floor, just quickly one question, one to Edmund and also to Professor Milton Muller. And because Professor Milton Muller addressed that a platform provider or registry should not liable for the third-party content. And first question to Edmund, would you like to respond to your DNS abuse for the first accused?
Yeah, definitely. I think I need to respond, and if you allow me to share my screen again to just illustrate what I wanted to say. First of all, I definitely do not think that content abuse is part of DNS abuse. This is what I shared. So I mentioned 4 abuses in different areas: on content, on infrastructure, on DNS, and within ICANN purview. And as you can see, the slice for within ICANN purview is very, very small. I want to make sure in the future I will update my slides to look like this so that it makes it clearer. I just realized that was the issue. But so I actually agree that registries and registrars are not, especially registrars in their function for registering domain names and supporting the domain name registration. That slice of DNS abuse and slice what that within ICANN purview should be very small. I guess my point is more that even there is a small slice, ICANN, there is room for developing a policy that focuses on that slice. But we have to understand that there are other abuses that we won't be able to touch, and it won't be part of the policy. And that's where ICANN can be successful, is to focus in that narrow scope. Hopefully this provides the necessary clarification. I note that my slides are not shown on the big screen. So if I can momentarily show that, it would be much more clear for other people who are there at the hybrid forum, at the physical forum. I guess that's not possible, but anyway, hopefully this clarifies the issue.
Okay, right, thank you. And second question back to Professor Muller. You've been talking about, as you foresee the situation, actually all the internet registries are suffering some great pressure for example, like taking down the content, illegal content, or probably not illegal content because the order not come from the court. It probably is abusive content. And also, for example, like IIR expand the service region from resource location to become a routing security gatekeeper. And can you share your view regarding to that kind of evolution?
I'm not sure I understood the last part of your question. You want my view about routing security, whether the RIRs would be gatekeepers for routing security? Was that it?
IIR expand, as George Michelson mentioned, we changed from 3 leg to 4 leg. And for additional leg, do you consider that requires some sort of public assessment or public consultation to get a support from general public? That's my question.
So you're still trying to add legs, Kenny. It's yeah, we're getting into insect territory here. Definitely, I think that would be a high-level policy choice that would involve that should involve widespread consultation across sectors, so that the question, it would be mostly industry people who I think would be really involved in that rather than just sort of general public. But I think that civil society organizations or academic organizations with a kind of a rights focus like IGP or maybe EFF would also be interested in the implications that a stronger role for RIRs in routing security would have for the freedom and openness of the internet. So that was one reason why I think there was a lot of controversy initially about who would be in control of RPKI certificates. It was like, do we want to centralize this in ICANN and have the big root debate again, or is each going to, do the RIRs trust ICANN? Again, I want Paul to answer that question, but he's not here. He's hiding. Do we want, because you can use that power to, and the internet service providers were very concerned about this, about whether the RIRs would suddenly gain control over their operations rather than simply being address distributors who enforced policies regarding the use and aggregation of addresses. So I'd like to hear from Michelson about that too.
You know, when a professor says that's very interesting, my heart sinks, because that's polite professor speak for I think you walked into a trap. But putting that to one side, my sense here is that question that Milton raises is actually a material question. The nexus between an address distribution process and a routing process is a really complicated relationship. And for the RIRs to take a step into a room that previously they were slightly outside of, it ruffled feathers. It made people sit up and think, what's going on here? So it's a delicate dance. Now, part of the problem actually goes to something I tried to say in the slides. There's a relationship between addresses and routing. And the injection of trust into routing is about who has an ability to say what should be done. And we were trying in RPKI to give operators an ability to say, I can provably show what I want done with the addresses I have been delegated. So the intention was to empower operators to independently assert their routing fate. We weren't going into this thinking we want to be the routing police, because I don't know how many different ways I could say this. We don't want to be those people. That's not our community expectation. That's not the governance direction we're receiving from our membership. We don't want the gig. But the consequence of a hierarchy in address and emergence of routing and the join between the two, it put us in the mix. And so now we do have a governance question that has to be talked about. I'd like to say that my admiration for the governance aspects of the other PKI, should have been perhaps clearer. It's the visibility. It's the transparency in the processes that ICANN uses, signing the DNSSEC route, that I think are really high value, that make me think, what are we doing to achieve a similar level of public trust in our process? And so I'm not briefed to speak to governance in the wide, and I can't speak to that very strongly. I can say that there's a technological benefit to the decision in the RIRs to have 5 separate routes, and it's that we're not mutually interdependent to make assertions about transfers. The technology basis for how we can say, yes, I can tell you that's validly here, doesn't depend on an apex body, and we can do that asynchronously. But you need to be very wary of taking a technology statement and translating it up into why something happened in policy or governance space. I don't believe that's why it happened. I think it's something that's notable as a technology drive, but I'm simply not briefed to talk to the wider policy question.
Okay, thank you, Michael. We still have around 15 minutes. I would like to open to the floor. And please queue up in front of the mic and say your name and your affiliation before you speak. No one? Okay, Please go ahead.
This is Guowei again. And the first I'd like to comment about, what is Milton asking is, I'm really having no problem about the trust anchor for the DNS, DNSSEC, and all RPKI. And, we have two gatekeeper, one for the DN and one for the IP. I think it's okay. It's not that. Of course, you can continue arguing about a political issue, and if there is there are no trust between the ICANN and IR or whatever. But I have no problem about that. I actually have one question for Adele. Adele is you are talking about the DNSSEC. But if you look at the George is talking about the RPKI, the George can give you a very clear picture about how the RPKI was implemented, how many percentage, and TWNIC is about 98% or whatever. Can we have similar kind of the DNSSEC distribution around the world? Is it possible we can see something about that? I think this is the first question for Adele. The second question actually for Adele and also for George. We know the DNSSEC and we know the RPKI is a trust anchor and then make sure the DNS is legal and the IP is legal. But if that is from government point of view or from the company point of view or for the user point of view, the DNSSEC, even the DNSSEC is 100% implemented, the RPKI is 100% implemented. Doesn't mean we can stop the hacker, we can stop the internet attacking. How far the DNSSEC and RPKI can push to minimize or at least try to reduce that kind of security, internet security attack, and if we look at the previews, most of the internet security problem, actually, to be honest, not many is because you don't have a DNSSEC, you don't have an RPKI. So that is my question for Adele and also for George.
Can I speak briefly and then leave the floor for Adiel? I will be very quick.
Okay, right, sure. Go ahead.
So when Milton talked about supply chains, he had a really, really good story because the supply chains in technology are very long. And in Taiwan, you're sitting at the apex of one of them. TSMC is now a central component of the availability of technology worldwide. And TSMC is in the unfortunate circumstance of needing to discuss with farmers in Taiwan availability of water. The entire global supply chain for chips and future technology is bound up in water availability, which, as we all know, worldwide is a central problem for the next 50 to 100 years. Countries go to war over water. So these questions, the supply chain question, and these questions, can we actually mitigate risk? It's like whack-a-mole, because you stand up and say, fine, let's re-import the chip dependency back into the mainland Europe, back into America to resolve this problem. Let's give TSMC grant money to rehome in America. Where's the silicon coming from? It's coming from two countries. What happens if you interrupt the supply chain for 9959's pure silicon? Where's the machinery coming from? It's coming from ASML or wherever in the Netherlands, out of Philips Labs. If you interrupt the supply chain because the boat's caught in the Suez, you can't get those extreme UV machines to make those chips. RPKI is the same. As we close the holes on the boundary of origination, the hackers are going to get smarter and they're going to work out how to attack on path. We haven't ended the spam problem in email by deploying DKIM. So when Milton says you're adding more legs to the insect, he kind of has a story. You can't fix these problems nailing more legs on the stool. That's not why we did it. We did it because the stool grew the leg organically. And we observed stability in one leg and stability in another leg. And we thought we better make the other legs equally strong. But adding legs, it doesn't solve the problem. That's me.
Yeah.
Before Adele, you answer. Actually, I asked the question for George and also Adele for one reason. I just try to make the Taiwan government and the company or the user understand, even you implement the DNSSEC, even you implement the Rpki poorly, doesn't really stop the security leaking, and security is much complicated than that. That's my point to asking the question. Thank you.
Okay, the mic is mute. Okay, back to Adele.
Yeah. So to touch on that last part of the question about DNSSEC and Rpki impact on security in general, as I mentioned originally, those are one piece of a puzzle that have so much element, and they address a very specific aspect of security at certain level. If we take the DNS protocol, for instance, DNSSEC is addressing a specific element of the protocol, which is the authentication. It doesn't address encryption of the data that are going through. It doesn't address the credential management. It doesn't address several other elements that are around the DNS in general. So yes, those are specific points that are being secure, but this has to be seen in a holistic and global manner. That's why, as I mentioned as well, from ICANN, we more and more talk about DNS ecosystem security than focusing only on the DNSSEC side, because we know that other elements can impact. So back to your first question about having more statistic or having more information about how the DNSSEC is being deployed, both from the signing side and from the validation side. There are efforts here and there to collect those information. For sure, I know ISOC has a map that they update regularly that shows the situation of the DNSSEC signing. ICANN has we have few initiatives as well to provide and collect more information. You may have heard about ITHI, for instance, that is collecting more information from the resolver side on validation. Again, that shows that we want to see how far resolver are validating the signed data. That project is going to include signature at the level of TLD as well, both CC and G. We are working on another project which is DNS Observatory that will have more and more data to give a very precise information about the status of DNSSEC, both signing and validation at country level, regional level, which can help, of course, country and community locally to improve. I think that is your second question. I think I missed one question, which is about the. Did I miss one question?
No, that's it. That's all. Yeah.
Okay. That's
okay,
all.
Eamon, your turn.
Yeah, if I can, I can respond a little bit to that. I think Katrina earlier had a graph that showed HTTPS used in phishing, and I think that's very telltale, and it dovetails into what Huawei is saying. Even if we do have the DNSSEC and Rpki deployed, we cannot route out these bad actors. However, I think the question, that we actually, the right question to ask is, with DNSSEC and RPKI, we can better trust the good players, right? I mean, we can know for sure this is the guy we're connecting to. So that part of the component is equally important in my mind, because, you know, in the last, to me, in the last 30 years or so, the general feeling is that the more people connect, the less technically sophisticated they are. I think that corner is turning. The younger generation is becoming more and more technically sophisticated, and they need the information. Yes, they need what DNSSEC actually does. So when they, you know, validate it, what does it mean, and what RPKI really does. It does not, you know, make you safer online, but it does make, for example, your update, software update, for example, it does make software update more secure, because you can trust that domain and trust that IP. So it only adds a little bit, but I still think it's worth the effort. That's I guess from my view.
Okay, thank you, Edmund. Okay, we still have very marginal time, 3 to 4 minutes. Welcome to second question. And if you did ask the question, please remain the opportunity to someone else.
No, I just don't agree with Edmund say. Even you implement the DNSSEC, even you implement the RPKI, that doesn't guarantee that is a good player on the internet. You know, the people who implement RPKI and implement the DNSSEC or, you know, whatever, they still can be a bad player. We know that. In the neighbor of your Hong Kong territory, you know that.
Okay, it's not a question. It's just a comment. Anyway. Okay, any other question from the floor? No other question? Okay. Anything you want to add for all the panelists for final word? I think everyone give a final word for 1 minute, starting from Adele.
Yeah, my final word will obviously start from the fact that, you know, securing the internet is not a task of one actor. It's not a task of turning on just one button and it works. It's a combination of several touching points, and we see that, and we will continue to see that from different angles, the DNSSEC, RPKI, and various other way of hardening the different components of what make the internet infrastructure. I will also conclude by saying that from ICANN perspective, even though ICANN is not heavily involved in the operation of the DNS in general, we are more and more getting resources to be able to monitor what is going on the ground in order to better inform the way we do our outreach in the area of, you know, running a secure and stable internet identifier in general, but also informing the community when it comes to policy making, when it comes to the direction they want ICANN to go. So you will see several initiatives like DAR, which is a little bit tied to, you know, DNS Abuse, that provide information on what is observed on abuse in general, which is a tool that I think more and more the domain name industry is appreciating, because it gives them information. I talk about ITHI. There is a new other initiative like Kindness, which is promoting best practices on DNS ecosystem security as well, to help in this complex task that we have to secure the DNS, but the global internet identifier system in general.
Thank you. Edmund, your second.
Yeah, building on what Adil just said, I think these challenges to the DNS and the internet infrastructure in general is not something that isolated we can deal with. And following from, I guess, this morning, the two keynote speech this morning, we also shouldn't continue, you know, increasingly try to depend on national legislation and purely industry norms that are are being forced on, and really try to develop the multi-stakeholder approach. And in my view, the multi-stakeholder approach is important. And for ICANN, since we're in an ICANN forum, for ICANN, it's very important to really identify that narrow scope and allow the multi-stakeholder approach to be an exemplary deployment of that, and especially on that point, when we deal with these cross-border security issues, the multi-stakeholder approach needs to be enhanced. The democraticness of it and the effectiveness of it is also under challenge, and that's also aspects and elements that this community needs to think through.
Thank you, George.
So this governance discussion, it's an interesting dance, isn't it, between different structural forms of engagement. We have GTLDs, we have CCTLDs, we have ICANN, we have the RIR system, we have advocacy and public policy discussions, academics, tech. It's a great dance. I value this dance a lot. I think we have to keep doing this stuff. I think the idea of brittleness and the introduction of complexity and the way that then goes to the stability of service, that's a serious question we have to think about. So security is generally adding things, and risk around security additions goes to the question, did you do too much and did you make something fragile trying to protect it? We have to think about that stuff. And the way we think about it is by keeping up the dance. So keep dancing.
Okay, keep dancing. Professor Muller.
Well, I hate to sound like Johnny One Note here, but I do think that the biggest problem with cybersecurity now is the intrusion of nation states, tech nationalism, and those kinds of initiatives. And it's very good that we have this community of multi-stakeholder institutions where we are solving problems, or at least not solving them, but mitigating them and dealing with them in a fairly rational and calm way. But we have to face the fact that, the people who are allegedly protecting us from threats are frequently the biggest causes of the threats, the nation-state rivalry. The SolarWinds may have been the Russians, it might have been the Chinese trying to spy on the Americans, and the Americans are doing all kinds of things to these other countries. We are, the Europeans are trying to assert digital sovereignty. We have extremely nationalistic tendencies in certain African and Latin American countries, data localization and so on, all in the name of security. I think it's kind of normally I deal with those kinds of issues, and it's kind of a relief to come back into this environment, which is more focused and more multi-stakeholder. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you. It's been great talking to you.
Thank you, Professor Muller. Katrina, you're the last one.
Yes, exactly. I'm the last one, and it's really difficult to be the last one when so many good things I agree with have been said. Well, I absolutely agree. Sometimes solutions that are proposed are worse than a problem itself. I love the internet, so let's not break it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you all. Before I adjourn the meeting, I please everyone give a big hand to all panelists, and also thank you for all your participation. Okay, thank you for your participation. The session is finished. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Huang, for moderating the session, and a big thank you to all panelists for a very animated panel discussion.